Imagine paying more for the exact same painkiller and feeling less pain because of it. Imagine choosing a worse option simply because a useless third option was placed next to it. Imagine believing you are rational, while your decisions quietly follow patterns you never agreed to. This is not a story about stupidity. It is a story about predictability. In Predictably Irrational, Dan Ariely reveals a deeply uncomfortable truth. We are not randomly irrational. We are irrational in the same ways again and again. And once you see these patterns, you will never look at money, choices, or even yourself the same way again. How an injury led me to irrationality. Ariely begins with a deeply personal story. As a teenager, he suffered severe burns over most of his body and spent years in hospitals undergoing painful treatments. During these treatments, nurses believed that ripping bandages off quickly caused less pain than removing them slowly. Ariely, who experienced the pain directly, felt the opposite. This mismatch between experience and belief sparked a lifelong curiosity. How could intelligent, experienced professionals be so wrong? The answer was not cruelty or incompetence, it was bias. Even experience does not protect us from systematic errors. This realization led Ariely into behavioral economics, a field that blends psychology and economics to understand how people actually behave, not how we assume they behave. The book is built around experiments that expose predictable mistakes in judgment and how they affect everyday life. Chapter 1: The Truth About Relativity: Why Everything is Relative, Even When It Shouldn't Be. Human beings rarely know what they want in absolute terms. Instead, we evaluate everything comparatively. Our judgments depend not on objective value, but on what sits next to an option at the moment of choice. Dan Ariely opens this chapter with a simple but powerful example: an online subscription offer from The Economist. Readers were given 3 choices: an internet-only subscription, a print-only subscription, and a print plus internet subscription priced the same as print alone. Almost no one chose print-only, but its presence pushed the majority toward the more expensive bundle. When the print-only option was removed, preferences flipped dramatically. The key insight is the decoy effect. A clearly inferior option can strongly influence our decision, not because we want it, but because it gives us something easy to compare against. We struggle to compare different categories, but we are very good at comparing similar ones. The mind seeks simplicity, even at the cost of accuracy. This principle explains why marketers structure menus, pricing tiers, and product bundles the way they do. High-priced items anchor perception and push consumers toward reasonable middle options. Restaurants list outrageously expensive dishes not to sell them, but to make the second most expensive item feel sensible. Retailers do the same with electronics, cars, and subscription plans. Ariely extends this idea into personal life. We compare jobs to jobs, salaries to salaries, relationships to relationships. Satisfaction does not come from what we have, but from how it stacks up against what others have. This constant comparison fuels envy, dissatisfaction, and endless upgrading. The tragedy of relativity is that it helps us decide, but it also ensures we are rarely content. Unless we consciously limit comparisons, we remain trapped in a cycle of wanting more, not because we need more, but because someone else has more. Chapter 2: The Fallacy of Supply and Demand: Why the Price of Pearls and Everything Else is Up in the Air. Traditional economics teaches that prices are determined by supply and demand. Ariely challenges this belief by showing that our sense of value is largely shaped by arbitrary anchors. An anchor is the first number we encounter when thinking about price. Once planted, it influences all future judgments, even if it has no logical connection to the item itself. In experiments, participants were asked whether they would pay certain prices for everyday products after first writing down random numbers. Shockingly, those random numbers strongly predicted how much they were willing to pay. This demonstrates that our willingness to pay is not discovered through careful reasoning, but constructed in the moment. Initial exposure creates expectations, and expectations become reference points. Ariely explains that this is how markets stabilize around irrational prices. Once we become accustomed to paying a certain amount for coffee, rent, or streaming services, those prices feel normal. Even when costs drop or alternatives appear, our anchors keep us locked in. The problem is that anchors persist. A bad deal today becomes tomorrow's standard. Over time, markets reflect collective memory rather than rational valuation. The implication is unsettling. Demand does not emerge from desire alone. It is trained, and once trained, it is remarkably difficult to unlearn. Chapter 3. The Cost of Zero Cost. Why we often pay too much when we pay nothing. Zero is not just another number. Zero changes everything. Ariely shows that when something is free, we stop thinking like rational decision makers and start acting emotionally. Free removes risk, doubt, and hesitation. It feels like a gain with no downside, even when that isn't true. In one experiment, participants could choose between a high-quality chocolate for a small price or a lower-quality chocolate for free. When both items cost something, people chose the better chocolate. But when the cheaper one became free, preferences flipped dramatically. Nothing about the products changed, only the price. Zero created an irrational attraction. This explains why free trials, buy one get one offers, and giveaways are so powerful. We overvalue free things and underestimate their hidden costs, such as time, commitment, or opportunity loss. The danger of zero is not that it tricks us once, but that it rewires our decision-making process. We stop asking, "Is this worth it?" and start asking, "Why not?" Chapter 4. The Cost of Social Norms. Why we are happy to do things, but not when we are paid to do them. Ariely distinguishes between two types of norms that govern human behavior: social norms and market norms. Social norms involve kindness, reciprocity, and relationships. Market norms involve money, contracts, and transactions. Problems arise when these two systems collide. People are often happy to help a friend move for free, but feel insulted if offered a small amount of money. Once payment enters the picture, the interactions shift from social to transactional, and the emotional meaning changes. Ariely shows that companies sometimes undermine motivation by introducing small financial incentives where social motivation once existed. Employees who might have worked hard out of loyalty or pride become disengaged when their effort is priced cheaply. Even worse, once market norms are activated, they're difficult to turn off. Removing payment does not restore goodwill. The relationship has been reframed. The lesson is clear: money is not a universal motivator. In many contexts, it weakens commitment rather than strengthening it. Chapter 5. The Influence of Arousal. Why hot is much hotter than we realize. We like to believe that our values are stable. Ariely shows that they are not. In experiments examining sexual arousal, participants made dramatically different decisions when aroused compared to when calm. Moral standards shifted, risk tolerance increased, and long-term consequences were discounted. The most important finding was not about sex. It was about empathy gaps. In a cold, rational state, we underestimate how much our behavior will change in a hot, emotional state. This explains why people break promises, abandon plans, and act against their own interests. Rules designed by our calm selves fail to control our emotional selves. Ariely argues that self-control requires anticipating our future weakness and building safeguards in advance. Willpower alone is unreliable. Chapter 6. The Problem of Procrastination and Self-Control. Why we can't make ourselves do what we want to do. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is a self-control problem. Ariely explores why people delay important tasks, even when they know it will harm them. The reason lies in how we weigh immediate discomfort against future benefits. In experiments involving deadlines, students perform best when they set their own deadlines, but only when those deadlines carried real penalties. Without consequences, deadlines were ignored. This reveals a harsh truth. We cannot rely on future motivation. Our future selves are no more disciplined than our present selves. To succeed, we must design systems that constrain us: automatic savings, enforced deadlines, and external accountability. Freedom feels empowering, but structure gets results. Chapter 7. The High Price of Ownership. Why we overvalue what we have. The moment we own something, its value changes in our mind. Ownership creates an emotional bond that inflates perceived worth, even when nothing about the object itself has changed. Dan Ariely explores this phenomenon through the endowment effect. In one experiment, students were randomly given coffee mugs and later offered the chance to sell them. Those who owned the mugs demanded significantly higher prices than non-owners were willing to pay. The gap was not driven by market logic, but by psychological attachment. What is striking is how quickly this effect appears. Ownership does not need time to develop. The mere act of possessing something, holding it, calling it mine, is enough to distort judgment. This bias affects far more than small objects. It shapes negotiations, real estate pricing, salary expectations, and even personal relationships. We resist change not because alternatives are worse, but because what we already have feels uniquely valuable. The endowment effect explains why people struggle to let go, why negotiations stall, and why markets slow down. Once ownership enters the picture, rational exchange becomes emotionally charged. Chapter 8. Keeping Doors Open. Why options distract us from our main objective. People hate closing doors. Even when keeping options open hurts them, they cling to alternatives out of fear of regret, fear of missing out, fear of making the wrong choice. Ariely illustrates this through experiments where participants could earn rewards by choosing between multiple options, but unused options slowly disappeared. Instead of focusing on the most profitable choice, participants wasted effort trying to keep all doors open. The result was predictable: lower overall performance. The desire to preserve options distracted participants from maximizing outcomes. This behavior mirrors real life. People stay in unsatisfying jobs, maintain weak relationships, or delay decisions because closing one door feels irreversible. Yet by refusing to commit, they often sacrifice progress. The chapter highlights a painful truth. Commitment feels risky, but indecision is often more costly. Chapter 9. The Effect of Expectations. Why the mind gets what it expects. Expectations do not merely shape perception. They shape experience itself. In experiments involving wine tasting, participants consistently reported that expensive wine tasted better than cheap wine, even when the wines were identical. Brain imaging revealed increased pleasure responses when people believed they were consuming higher-priced products. This is not deception. It is construction. The brain uses expectations to interpret sensory input. When we expect quality, we experience quality. Placebo effects operate on the same principle. Belief activates real physiological responses. Expectations influence pain, enjoyment, and satisfaction. This insight explains why branding, presentation, and reputation matter so much. The mind does not passively receive reality. It helps create it. Chapter 10. The Power of Price. Why a 50-cent aspirin can do what a penny aspirin can't. Price is not just a cost. It is a signal. Ariely shows that higher-priced products often produce stronger effects, even when they are chemically identical to cheaper alternatives. In studies involving painkillers, participants reported significantly greater relief from expensive pills than from cheap ones. The brain interprets price as a cue for quality and effectiveness. When something costs more, we expect more, and those expectations shape outcomes. This mechanism explains why luxury brands thrive, why expensive treatments feel more effective, and why discounts sometimes backfire. Price does not merely reflect value. It actively creates it in the mind of the consumer. Chapter 11. The Context of Our Character, Part 1. Why we are dishonest, and what we can do about it. Most people think of dishonesty as a trait, something bad people do. Ariely shows that dishonesty is largely situational. In experiments, participants cheated more when they could do so without directly handling money, and when the distance between action and consequence was increased. Yet most people cheated only a little. This reveals a crucial insight. People want to benefit from cheating while still seeing themselves as honest. We balance gain against self-image. Simple moral reminders, such as recalling ethical codes or pledges, dramatically reduce cheating. The presence of these reminders activated a moral framework that constrained behavior. Dishonesty, then, is not driven by greed alone, but by context and rationalization. Chapter 12. The Context of Our Character. Part 2. Why Dealing with Cash Makes Us More Honest. Abstract money weakens moral restraint. Ariely demonstrates that people cheat more when rewards are separated from physical cash. Tokens, credit cards, and digital representations create psychological distance, making dishonesty feel less real. When money becomes tangible, when we must physically handle it, ethical resistance increases. Cash makes consequences visible. This insight has profound implications for modern economies, where transactions are increasingly digital and abstract. The more removed we are from real consequences, the easier it becomes to cross ethical lines. Chapter 13. Beer and Free Lunches. What is behavioral economics, and where are the free lunches? Ariely closes the book by stepping back and explaining the broader purpose of behavioral economics. Unlike traditional economics, which assumes rational actors, behavioral economics accepts human irrationality as systematic and predictable. By understanding these patterns, we can design better policies, institutions, and personal strategies. The idea of free lunches refers to improvements that cost little but deliver large benefits. Small changes in structure that help people make better decisions without restricting freedom. The chapter emphasizes that recognizing our limitations is not pessimistic. It is empowering. Once we understand how we actually behave, we can build environments that guide us toward better outcomes. Predictably Irrational reveals that our mistakes are not random flaws, but consistent patterns built into the way the human mind works. We compare instead of calculate, feel instead of analyze, and trust our intuitions even when they quietly mislead us. The danger is not irrationality itself, but ignorance of it. By understanding these hidden forces, relativity, emotion, expectation, ownership, and context, we don't become perfectly rational, but we become wiser. And that awareness gives us something far more powerful than logic alone: the ability to design better choices, avoid predictable traps, and make decisions that truly serve us.